Hello and welcome to the SportsPro podcast. Now, before we start the show, I just wanted to give you a little nudge to talk about our sister podcast. That is Streamtime Sports. It features my colleague Chris Stone and SportsPro CEO Nick Meacham, and it's published weekly, covering all of the latest news and developments in the sports media space, with a special focus on the people, businesses and technologies driving the sports streaming revolution. It comes out every Wednesday and is the go-to place for broadcast professionals. Streamtime Sports wherever you get your podcasts. Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the SportsPro podcast. This is often one of our best listened to shows of the year. Of course, I'm talking about our 50 Most Marketable podcast, powered by Northstar. I think that's the technical term. Someone will tell me it's wrong, but too late now. Sorry, guys. It's the joy of podcasting. With me to talk about Most Marketable Athletes, I have Ed Dixon and Sam Carp. Hello, Ed.
Hello, Tom.
Hello, Sam.
Hey Tom, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Thank you for asking. Busy period for us with this list coming out. Easily our most high profile thing that we do here at SportsPro. Let's go straight into it. Ed, I'm going to start with you. Now, I don't think for anyone listening to this should be a surprise because the list came out on Tuesday, and it's now Thursday. But Simone Biles is the most marketable athlete this year. Thoughts?
I think very well deserved. Let's get straight into the data, I think. Why not? Because that's what everybody's here for.
Oh, everyone loves numbers, yeah.
Exactly. So you mentioned,
especially in audio form, people love it.
Yeah, we've got a PowerPoint just up now that only we can see. No, I think it's probably worth just taking a slight backward step and sort of maybe talking about the scoring system, the methodology that goes into 50mm provided by our friends at Northstar. So back in the day, it used to involve a load of us sitting down, having a few drinks in the pub and making sure we got a decent spread of athletes from various different sports, which are slightly less scientific. Now with Northstar, there are basically multiple sort of data points at play, multiple metrics that ultimately inform the top 50. So that there's essentially a 3-pillar scoring system to determine each athlete's marketability that's focused on brand strength, total addressable market and triple bottom line. There's 16 qualitative and quantitative drivers, which I won't go through, but those have all helped inform the top 50. And unsurprisingly, Simone Biles scores very well in all of them. Now, I know it's not just about the data, but it helps inform what we kind of already know about Simone Biles. You know, jaw-droppingly talented. It's got an amazing story behind her in terms of her comeback after Tokyo 2020. You only have to look at things like her brand portfolio, what she stands for. She's this sort of heady mix of incredibly talented, the most decorated gymnast of all time, but she also stands for something as well. If you're going to ask for a complete package of a marketable athlete, she is pretty close to it.
Yeah. She is the first female to top the list twice, Sam Carp. What are your thoughts on Simone Biles as number one? Are you in agreement with Ed? Is she the most deserving person on this list?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a few things that probably go into it. I think the fact that it was an Olympic year obviously helps. And you mentioned that it's the first woman to be in the number one spot twice. If you look at the last time she was named most marketable, that was 2021, which was also an Olympic year in Tokyo, albeit under very different circumstances. And Tokyo was obviously a very difficult time for Biles, who pulled out of 2 Olympic finals. And while she was there because of challenges with her mental health, the twisties is the term used in gymnastics, I think, which basically meant she couldn't trust in her performance. So yeah, kind of going into this year, I think the biggest story, the biggest narrative heading into Paris 2024 was whether Biles had overcome that. And as Ed alluded to, everyone knew that she was one of the best gymnasts ever. And what happened in Tokyo, I don't think changed that. She had the gold medals to prove it anyway, but she'd been out of the spotlight for such a long time, and hadn't actually competed until August last year. So there was really a question of whether those issues were going to appear again in Paris. So that made her comeback a big story, really. And I think everyone knew it, like the media knew it, her sponsors knew it. There was a whole Netflix documentary about a month or two beforehand, which really, when you think about it, if you've previously sort of had a challenging experience at a major event because of kind of the pressure and kind of the various different things going on in your head, but she was carrying a lot of weight going into Paris anyway. And then for her to deliver on that massive stage with the world watching her kind of cemented that status, I think, of what a lot of people are now calling her, which is the GOAT of gymnastics. Obviously became the most decorated US gymnast of all time, which is no mean feat given how competitive it is to get into that team. So yeah, I think that's kind of the big narrative behind her being number one this year, is just like, yeah, that whole comeback arch was something that generated the biggest story in the biggest sporting event of 2024.
And you had a unique perspective on this, of course, Sam, being in Paris yourself. Those sessions where she was performing were some of the most in demand ticket-wise and media-wise of the whole of the Olympics. Right?
Yeah, I think like you can talk about her being this amazing gymnast, the greatest gymnast of all time, but I think she's kind of transcended that in a sense now as just kind of among one of the greatest athletes of all time, really. And I think going to watch her has become a bucket list item in the same way that, you know, watching Messi, for example, became a bucket list item for a lot of people, probably LeBron James, Serena Williams. I think she's in that tier now. And you got a sense of that in Paris as well, right? You know, Serena Williams was there watching her one night, Tom Cruise, Pharrell, Lady Gaga, John Travolta, Snoop Dogg.
Snoop Dogg was everywhere. That's
he was everywhere, but he was also there watching Simone Biles.
This is true.
Yeah, watching her has become a bucket list item now. And I think she's kind of pushed past that status of just being kind of a really talented athlete, and just to kind of she's in that sort of cultural icon level now where people want to see her, people want to be in the same room as her, people want to see her compete. And there was definitely a sense of that in those arenas in Paris, not just among those A-listers who turned out to see her, but also just the crowd as well. Like the volume went up a notch every time she completed one of her routines. There was just a growing sense of tension every time she stepped up to the mat, because I think everyone knew they were about to see something kind of generational. So there's definitely a few things which contribute to why she is at the top of this list.
Part of that, I guess, as well, is that, and look, she's on a victory tour at the moment, I believe. But part of that as well is probably because there's a scarcity element to this. We're not going to see Simone Biles performing at too many more Olympics, I don't think.
Maybe none.
None.
She was already the oldest. So it's so weird. She's 27. You're saying like she's the oldest of something. The oldest woman to win a gold medal in gymnastics for 60 years, which kind of just speaks to how unprecedented it was and just kind of her talent as well. So yeah, there are questions over whether she will compete again in LA, but I'd imagine that the organisers of LA and her sponsors would quite like it if she did, because obviously the commercial opportunities around that home games would be huge.
With that in mind, do you think, well, I'll let you both take turns at this, we're at the peak of Simone Biles' marketability right now? Is this it? Have we anointed the apex mountain of her marketing career as an athlete?
If she's there at LA 2028, the Olympic Games, the biggest sporting gathering in the world, the biggest sports market in the world, if she goes out there and performs, coupled with everything I've just said, I would say, no, we haven't reached her peak yet. That could come at LA 2028, which seems like an extraordinary thing to say given what she's already done. But I wouldn't rule out her finding, well, there isn't a mountain bigger than Everest, but if there was, if she climbs that one.
Sam, is this peak? Are we at peak Biles?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because it does feel like this year in particular, just that narrative and that storyline was so prominent throughout. It's going to be hard to create that kind of groundswell again. So even if she were to compete in LA 28, there's no doubt that she'd be on the posters, she'd be in all the advertising, she'd be the biggest star of that event probably. But you know, even if she did get there, would she deliver again in the same way that she did here? Would it cap things off in the same way that this did? I'm not sure. But even if she doesn't compete, I still think that there'll be something marketable. I still think she'll have value to brands. Like I think again, the fact that she's reached that status now alongside those other kind of like greatest of all time athletes is that you're still going to be relevant to a brand irrespective of whether you're competing or not. So one of the features that we've got up on the website now is basically a profile on what makes Biles so marketable. And one of the people that I spoke to for that was Matrona Filippo at Coca-Cola, who obviously ran that Powerade ad in the build up to Paris. And she was saying that they started working with Biles just after Tokyo. And at that point, they didn't actually know if she was going to come back. So they were putting together this whole campaign irrespective of whether she was going to compete in Paris. I think that speaks to the fact that her reach, her sort of story resonates so strongly, irrespective of whether she's competing, that, you know, there is still going to be a significant kind of marketable element around Biles, whether she's competing or not.
Yeah, it seems like to me that she's transcended gymnastics, certainly, and almost transcended the Olympics, because really, let's be honest, gymnastics as a sport doesn't exist in the eyes of many outside of those couple of weeks every 4 years. Focusing on the Olympics actually is quite a nice way to move on to the next subject, or the next area I wanted to focus on, because I think by my count, 21 of the top 50 were in Paris, either on teams or competing individually.
I hope it's 20 because I put that in the press release.
Okay, well,
so if it's 20 or 21.
Yeah,
so
I may have snuck in.
Apologies to our media friends.
Let's count it right now.
Yeah, that'll make great audio. That was including people in teams, and all of that.
It's close enough.
It's close enough. 2021, who knows? 2021 athletes in the top 50. 5 of the top 10, I believe, as well in Paris. I'm including LeBron James in that. Obviously, maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not, but Olympians dominate the list in a year when the Olympics is on. Shock horror.
It's very succinct, Tom. I'll give you that. I think Paris 2024, aside from the fact it kind of reaffirmed what the Olympics is in terms of it being, a showcase for athletes to really step into the spotlight, I think that is kind of always a given. But I think it felt much more pronounced this year because you could argue it's perhaps the most sort of quote unquote normal games since arguably London 2012, which again is a very Eurocentric look at it. But, Rio had its various problems, including finances. It was labelled a financial disaster. We know what happened with Tokyo 2020. So I think a games that it had this sense of occasion. It had everything that I think the casuals want from an Olympics, which is, a recognisable city, lots of crowds, good vibes. And I think that all added up to sort of amplify what the Olympics can already do in terms of putting athletes in the spotlight. That was kind of how I saw it, really, as a broad term. But yes, Olympics, good for marketability.
I guess there's no probably better example of that, Sam, than Alona Mar, who's ranked 9th on this list. I don't think anyone would have heard of her before the Olympics, but now she's a big star and she's been given that platform by the
Games. She's actually 8th.
8th, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Yes, 8th is correct.
Starting to think Ed was right with his...
It could be. He could well have been.
Although I've just counted while you two were talking and I've got 14, so I must be miles off. But
included tennis players.
Yeah, I have. Just a terrible counter, mate. It's the whole... Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because for 3 years and 50 weeks, we're never thinking about any of these athletes. And then for a fortnight, every 4 years, they're at the centre of the sporting universe. There's no other sports event happening really during those 2 weeks. So you have no choice but to watch it. But yeah, also the fact it's free to air, massive reach, and brands know that basically. So brands know that tapping into these athletes, they're going to get access to a huge global audience, and they're also going to be able to tell stories that aren't necessarily relevant in non-Olympic years, basically, because as you've alluded to already, a lot of the sports that are at the event just don't have that kind of visibility outside of the games. And with Alona Mar, I think it's a really interesting one because, as you've both mentioned, there's 20 athletes on this list who 21, depending on who you believe, who were at the Olympics. Some of those had really big pre-existing audiences anyway. So as you mentioned, LeBron James, even people like Katie Ledecky who have featured on this list in the past. And then for Alona Mar to parachute straight in at number 8 speaks to kind of the power of the event to just kind of transform your profile, I think. But I think the way that Mar was able to do that is different to a way that we've seen any Olympic athlete do it in the past, because she was doing it all on kind of her own terms, on her own platform. It wasn't kind of through traditional media platforms like broadcast. It was because of her TikTok content, kind of the interviews that she was doing around that and promoting body positivity. It really resonated with a pretty significant audience. And I think if you do look at the data, if people do want to download the full PDF,
I very much encourage you to do that as well, because it's more than just the 50 you get. There's the whole... How many does it go up to? Is it 125, 150? 150, yeah. Lots of really interesting stuff. So yeah, please do download the list. You can do so by searching on the internet.
Yeah, but I mean, if you dig deep down into some of those numbers, she ranks really high for purpose, mission, and values. So as I said, sort of the way she used her platform to talk about body positivity, she ranked 2nd out of all of those 150 for audience engagement. So I think that just speaks to the fact that you may be an athlete competing in a sport that maybe isn't the biggest Olympic sport, and you may not be the greatest athlete in your sport, but if you've got that kind of personality and if you have got that really highly engaged audience on your own platforms now, then you are marketable in the eyes of brands. So Alona Mar was an interesting case study, the way that people consume these Olympics changed.
And she's on Dancing with the Stars.
No greater testament than that.
Exactly. I've counted again, and I'm very certain it's 21. Go make some revisions to that press release if I was.
That's already gone.
The other person on here, I mean, we could have dived into any of those 21 really, but the one I wanted to pick out was Noah Lyles as an Olympic athlete. Athletics, of course, being sort of the showpiece, the central part of Summer Olympic Games. He put in some pretty astounding performances and also said some kind of interesting things, and clearly wants to be higher on the 50 most marketable list, let's be real. He talked in the wake of winning his gold medal about wanting his own shoe deal and not just talking about spikes, but trainers, because he thinks that's where the money is. He was on sprint beforehand. Do you think, ranked 14, that Noah Lyles achieved his goal of breaking out of athletics and becoming a crossover star?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, just because you know more about Grand Slam track than I do, but he's not signed up to that, has he?
No, but I don't know if that would be a sort of negotiation, I imagine.
Well, I think he's apparently expressed concerns about the visibility and reach of the event, among other things. You know, there could be multiple things at play. But for me, from the outside looking in, it seems odd that a league that is there, one of its main purposes is to increase the discussion and visibility around athletics outside of the Olympics. That someone like a Noah Lyles hasn't jumped all over that. Again, there may be various moving parts to it in terms of negotiations, but you mentioned his, desire for a shoe. He's quite a divisive figure, which promotes debate and discussion. I wonder, again, performance is obviously an important metric in marketability, but it's not everything. I wonder if he'd won the 200. Obviously, he was suffering with COVID at the time, but arguably he was the bigger favourite for that than he was the 100. If you've got a double Olympic gold medalist in sprinting and you carry that into LA 2028, yeah, maybe he would have been higher. But yeah, I think there is obviously this Usain Bolt sized shaped gap that has been missing since he retired. And I think, are we ever going to get another Usain Bolt in the same way we're going to get another Lionel Messi, for example? That's a different debate. But I think Lyles is one of several that are kind of at that sort of circling the most marketable sprinter, if you like. And I think he's one of several, but yeah, he's top of the pile at the moment.
I always worry when someone like comes out publicly and is like,
put me on 50mm.
Yeah, basically. It's just talking about like why they're like talking, just really forcing the issue a little bit. And that's the thing.
Sort of like if you have to say it.
Yeah, like you shouldn't need to say it. That's for Northstar to decide. But yeah, that's my thing with Lyles, is that it just always feels quite forced. Like even down to the way, to his entrance at the Olympics and the way he'd sort of bounce around for ages and run up and down, run basically 100 meters, sort of like introducing himself to the crowd. And then what I found really interesting, actually being in the stadium for the 100-meter final, humble brag, was that while he was going up on his sort of victory lap, like everyone was just looking at Snoop Dogg instead. The eyes were drawn away from him really quickly. So it just feels a little bit forced. And I don't know how many people outside of like sporting circles really know that much about Lyles. Like everyone knew about Usain Bolt. He had the trademark celebration. There was an arrogance, but it was an arrogance that he like backed up.
Multiple world records are probably a big part of that as well, doing things that people have never been able to do before.
Yeah, and just kind of the margin of victory that he used to have. Whereas with Lyles, there's an arrogance and you feel he hasn't quite earned the right to that arrogance yet.
You're a harsh critic. He's the reigning world champion, I think, in the 200 and the reigning Olympic champion in the 100. I mean,
he is.
The only thing he hasn't done is break a world record.
Yeah, he is. But for whatever reason, just kind of the arrogance overshadows that. My thing really is the whole shoe debate as well. Like, is Noah Lyles going to shift shoes for Adidas? Like, I can't see that personally. Maybe I'm wrong. Clearly people do like Noah Lyles, but I just think he's forcing the issue a little bit too much. He is too divisive a character right now to really sort of put himself in that conversation a little bit higher up. But 14 is not low, is it? So
it's not low. He is the only track and field star on there, and he's probably got a decent cycle coming up ahead of LA 28 to potentially shift some shoes. Do you know who do shift shoes, guys? Female basketball players.
Seamless.
They shift a lot of shoes. And do you know how I know that? Because there's loads of them on this list. I would say that's potentially the biggest trend in 50mm this year is the number of women's basketball players. And interestingly, this is something we saw last year, not all of them are in the WNBA. Again, we've got that smattering of college stars in here too. Tell me I'm wrong when it comes to the female basketball players. Are they the biggest trend of 50mm this year?
The WNBA's got more athletes in this year's lineup than any other league. They've got 6. And a Caitlin Clark and an Angel Reese, I think we can probably say quite confidently they would have made the list regardless of whether they'd stayed in college or been drafted into the WNBA because of how they've tracked. I think for me, it's the stand-up, well, certainly one of the stand-up trends, because it sort of points to how the WNBA is sort of leveraging itself as this kind of challenger league and how it works with its athletes to sort of promote itself as well. I mean, Phil Cook, the WNBA chief marketing officer, he was very open and said that if Caitlin, this is before Caitlin Clark joined, but he said if she does join it, it's kind of the equivalent of when Tiger Woods joining the PGA Tour moment. So that gives you an idea of sort of what they were dealing with and what potential they had. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at other trends, and actually just to go back to Caitlin Clark, we could reel off all the records that the WNBA has set this year in terms of attendance and viewership and things like that, which we're not really here to do, but the point stands that it's been a standout draft class, and that has just carried the WNBA to multiple records this year. We could always talk about some of the athletes that didn't make the cut if we want, for any fans of your Emma Raducanos or your Robert Lewandowskis, but that's probably not why we're here. I mean, some of the other trends I picked up on were in terms of the split, the top 10, it's a 50-50 gender split, 28 male athletes, 22 female athletes across the top 50. Does anyone want to guess who the oldest people in the list are? They're all 39 and there's 3 of them.
LeBron, Ronaldo, and Lewis Hamilton.
Correct, yeah.
All in the top 20?
Yep.
Old people steal stuff. Love
Yeah,
it.
indeed.
This is good for me. I can still steal stuff.
Who's the world's most marketable teenager?
Lamine Yamal?
Correct.
He's lower down than the 50, isn't he, Lamine?
Yeah, he's 41st. But yeah, you sort of feel he's here to stay.
Certainly. Well, I mean, yeah, just to kind of ram home the point about WNBA, Caitlin Clark is 4th on this on this year's list. And also from the WNBA, we have Brianna Stewart at 21, Kelsey Plum at 22, and Paige Buchers is at 16. She's obviously not in the WNBA yet, but probably headed that direction. Yeah, Sam, were there any other trends that you had picked up on from this year's list?
Well, I was going to chime in on the WNBA one quickly first, but because I think it's like there's a really unique dynamic in that it's just it's one of the, I don't know, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, because obviously in the US, there's obviously this unique situation where people learn about athletes before they enter the big leagues. But obviously now what you've had with the WNBA and kind of the rise of social media and NIL is that they're just trying to build their audience on those platforms a lot more. And there was always this question with this draft class of how the WNBA was going to capitalize or whether that audience was going to follow these players into the WNBA. And that's kind of happened. I feel like it's created a unique dynamic in a team sport anyway, where it isn't necessarily kind of like the league brand or the team brands kind of taking those athletes to the next level. It's almost like those athletes, I don't know, like the WNBA, I'm sure, has been doing some things to capitalize on it, but it doesn't really feel like it's had to do loads to sort of to leverage these athletes. It feels like people have been happy to turn up and people have wanted to see the likes of Clark, to see the likes of Angel Reese, although Angel Reese does seem to have damaged her marketability irreparably by having Travis Kelce's ex on her podcast, which did not go down well with Swifties.
Oh dear.
Maybe that's a conversation for another time.
So I guess the thing to say about basketball as a sport probably speaks to why there are so many basketball players in this list, is that while it is a team sport, it's a team of 5. They're very, very visible. Like almost all shots are of their face. You can see their reactions quite clearly. You can see the bench reacting to pretty much anything. It's not like a 50-odd man NFL roster or a MLB game where the pitcher changes pretty much depending on who they're playing. Like there's a very tight concentration of who the people are that are recognisable in those leagues. Whereas in the NBA and the WNBA now, I mean, in the WNBA, they haven't got to 16 teams yet. So there's this less focus. So all of that, like just on a purely practical level, it's quite easy to reel off the names in the WNBA in a way that will change a bit, but it's not going to change loads because, yeah, at the same time, you can only ever get 5 of them on the court at once. From the same team. So yeah, there's a practical element to that I think that always is worth talking about with basketball. One of the things that I'd spotted, and it's a bit of a kind of changing of the guard, and that's in tennis. They're not ranked really high, but Yannick Sinner is there at number 47. Carlos Alcaraz is a little bit higher up. He is at 29. Now, Novak Djokovic is still the highest ranked male tennis player on this, but Rafael Nadal is ranked now at 34. So those are the last 2. So Nadal, Djokovic are the last 2 of the big 3, big 4 era. And Yannick Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz, it really seems are ascending on the men's tennis side. And we've seen a few of these pretenders kind of come and go, but it does really feel like those two are at the top of that sport. I'm thinking this could be the last time. Well, I mean, it'll be certainly the last time we see Rafael Nadal, but it may be the last time that Novak Djokovic is this high up the list compared to those two, at least anyway. And it probably says a lot about where the women's game is at the moment, that the world number one is only ranked 50th in Iga Swiatek. It sort of seems like a pretty transient time in tennis. I don't know if there was anything else that you guys had thoughts on when it comes to racquetball.
Yeah, Coco Gauff is the highest ranked tennis player on the whole list. She's 13th. But yeah, I'd take your point about Iga Swiatek. Nike they've put all their eggs in the Sinner and Alcaraz baskets with their endorsement deals. Two of the best tennis players are potentially for the next decade on Nike's books. Obviously, we've seen contracts end and players move on to other brands, like with Federer.
Yeah, Djokovic is at a rolling cast of brands, isn't he? I think he's now with Lacoste, but he's been all over the gaff.
Yeah. No athlete is infallible. It'll be interesting to see what the next year has in store for Sinner, given the sort of VADA appealing the decision against the doping case against him. That's all slightly up in the air. You know, he's been very open about the impact that's had on him on a personal level. But again, that's sort of a can of worms that looks like it's going to reopen, is going to rumble on for the next year. You could argue it's affected his ranking this year, perhaps, considering how low down he is.
Especially as he's won 2 Grand Slams. So yeah.
Exactly. I think Alcaraz, certainly in terms of just raw talent and what he's offered so far, he's clearly here to stay. And we've seen, how his compatriot Nadal has performed over the last decade in 50mm. I think what the men's game is certainly looking for, if there's anything close to the rivalry of the Fab Four or the Holy Trinity, whatever the hell tennis fans call them, I can't remember.
I think just big was what they went for.
Yeah, just big rival, but that elevates the standard, but it also elevates the rivalries, the sort of the narrative around that, and that feeds into exposure, marketability, and things like that. So I think particularly in tennis, often, or indeed any sport, I think what drives athletes to find that next level, and indeed for the various sports organizations, leagues, teams, whatever, to craft that narrative is competition. It's having a sort of a cast of characters, if you like, that sort of provides that narrative that fans really buy into, whether you're an ardent fan or casual. So I think on the men's side, certainly Sinner and Alcaraz look to be the two leading lights. But if more can come to the fore, I think it could be a very interesting time ahead for men's tennis, particularly with Djokovic only going to be the last one standing for the year ahead.
Alcaraz is 21 and Sinner's 23. So if they're able to kind of battle each other on a regular enough basis, I think they will boost themselves higher up this list than they are currently. Now, you talked about how competition was kind of key to this, but one thing that's quite interesting I found, and I haven't talked about football very much, but there are 3 players from one team in the top 20. Sam, what team is that and who are those players?
Crystal Palace.
God, no, that will never happen.
It's Real Madrid, of course. Yeah, obviously Vinicius Jr., number 2, highest ranked football player in the list. Kylian Mbappe at number 7, who went to Real Madrid over the summer. And Jude Bellingham sneaking inside the top 20 at number 19. One of the drivers of the total addressable market pillar in the methodology is sort of sport and team awareness. And in terms of a marketable brand in football, I think Real Madrid is probably up there as the most marketable. So it probably speaks to the strength of them to see those 3 in there. But I think those 3 are also just kind of in there on merit anyway, like irrespective of if they were at Real Madrid or not, you could probably make a case for them featuring, whether it be in the top 20, in the top 50 at the very least. Yeah, I mean, Vinicius in particular, there's a few things you can talk about with him. I think it's interesting because he's sort of, again, can be quite a divisive figure at times. I've spoken about this on another podcast where basically said that, he's known to he plays on the edge a little bit, known to goad his opponents in some ways, opposition fans at the same time as well. But I think the thing that he does do consistently is he backs it up and delivers. And he's been an integral part of Real Madrid's last 2 Champions League wins. So he's, consistently delivering for them now.
And outspoken on social matters too, it should be said.
Yeah, which is definitely an important thing to talk about. I think he's now got a law named after him in Brazil, in Rio, where it's like basically a sporting event can be suspended if there's a racist incident. So I think that as well has probably kind of elevated him a little bit in terms of making sure that he's taking that stand and speaking out on those matters. Kind of goes in hand with that sort of what he's doing on the pitch as well.
Yeah, great timing for him as well with this list coming out just a few days before the Ballon d'Or. If he wins it, it's definitely because of this list. And if it's not, then we won't talk about it anymore. But that's maybe enough on football. Ed, you mentioned some missing names. Now, I when I was flicking through this, I looked all the way down past the top 50 because I'd like to do my deep research. And the real big foolers are. And maybe this will be a sort of a boomerang effect, but in a year where there's a Summer Olympics, Winter Olympic stars not doing so well. Yeah, three names who previously we've featured quite prominently: Chloe Kim, of course, and Michaela Schifrin, who are in the top 10. Eileen Gu, another who featured quite high up the list, all dropping down. Is this a surprise, or do you think we'll just see them all back in next year?
Why, possibly. I mean, Chloe Kim, she's had quite a sporadic competition schedule. In 2024, there's been a lot of younger talent that's come in. A lot of athletes, their rankings can be quite cyclical when it comes to Olympic cycles. So I think wouldn't surprise me if they're knocking at the door next year. Yeah,
we'll be talking about a build up to a US-based games as well, I think as well. So there'll be that narrative. Salt Lake, is it the next one? No, it's not. It's in Italy. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Time flies.
We're talking about them anyway, though.
We'll be talking about them because there'll be a Winter Olympics coming up. God, really getting my cycles all over the place. Sam, the other kind of eye-catching thing here, lack of golfers. Are you surprised?
I feel like we talk about this every year. There's always a lack of golfers. There's always, I think, a lack of baseball players.
And there's loads of tennis players.
Yeah. Well, what's that about? No, I think with golf, I think the one there has always been a representative in there. It's always been Rory McIlroy in recent years. I think he's probably been the only golfer who's made the cut in the past couple of years. Woods might have snuck back in there after his comeback. But given what's going on in the professional game at the moment, there's far too much attention on kind of the politics of the sport rather than the actual sport itself and the athletes competing in it. And McIlroy himself has become kind of an integral figure in that, which I don't think has done much for his marketability. But I think also just golf in general, just golfers aren't that relatable at the moment. I think their Netflix documentary, for example, really kind of backfired.
Interesting. I really like the Netflix documentary.
But I just think it made golfers come across like they live on a different planet to the rest of us, which is kind of cool in some senses.
And also true.
It's cool in some ways. But if you're looking at other people on this list, like Simone Biles, who spoke about her challenges with mental health, for example, that makes her very relatable to a lot of people. Vinicius Jr. speaking out on being a victim of racist abuse, that speaks to a lot of people and is relatable to a lot of people. Flying in a private jet everywhere and accepting $100 million check from Saudi Arabia, not that relatable to a lot of people. So I think that's kind of part of why you're maybe seeing less representation from golf at the moment. There's a lot of upheaval in the sport. There's a lot of division in the sport. And also one of the tours that some of the biggest players are playing on, like no one's watching it because it doesn't have a proper broadcast deal. So yeah, there's numerous factors feeding into it, I think, and it's, to me, not a surprise that there are no golfers represented in this list.
If I was going to pick out one thing about golf, because I love talking about golf, is that...
Here we go.
So these are the top three in terms of golfers, and they're all outside the top 50. Scotty Scheffler is 65, Rory McIlroy is 75, and sandwiched in between them at number 73 is Bryson DeChambeau. Bryson DeChambeau actually probably is the golfer doing the most at the moment to promote himself. He obviously did that very high profile round and content piece with Donald Trump. But in general, he's really embraced YouTube golf as a way of reaching fans. You'd think probably if he was playing week in, week out on the PGA Tour and doing his YouTube stuff, he might be higher up this list. But
I'm not endorsing Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, Donald Trump has fans. You might not like them, but by playing golf with him, Bryson DeChambeau opened up a couple of interesting conversations. The merits of those can be discussed elsewhere, but he's putting himself out there in a way that others aren't. And that maybe is why he is the only live player in this, and why he's higher than Rory McIlroy and only behind the world number one in Scotty Scheffler, albeit all outside the top 50. Before we wrap up, I don't know if we've done this exercise before, but I wanted to, because it's good to.
I hear exercise and I immediately think I'm back at school, and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, you need to get out those little pens which have your handwriting look good, and those tiny little notepads. 2025, I want a tip from each of you as to who is someone outside the top 50, maybe not even on the list, who is going to be a big new entrant. And I'm thinking of a big new entrant, not saying it only scrapes in. I want someone really high ranking. Ed, do you want to go first?
Shohei Ohtani seems like one to keep an eye on. We know he's a generational talent. He's had an extraordinary season, and this is the first season that he's actually having an impact in the postseason, which many felt was kind of holding him back. If he wins the World Series, who knows what that'll do to him. But it does feel like this year has been on the cusp of becoming a household name. But he's kind of one of those athletes where he's that good that regardless of whether you're a baseball fan or not, you will have heard of him. So he would be one I think people should keep an eye on. And it would end a bit of a dry patch for baseball players appearing in 50mm because they haven't featured in the last couple of lists. So yeah, he could be the one to break the mould.
Okay. A return to the top 50 for Shohei. Sam, what are you going with?
Sorry if I took him, by the way.
No, you didn't. I remember vouching for Shohei in 2019, mate. No, I'm joking.
Oh, man. Better like that. It's
we
a slow burner.
No. Yeah, I hate it when you make us do predictions.
But no one ever remembers them, so it's fine.
No, yeah, we'll be sat here in 12 months and be like, you guys said. Shohei Ohtani will be the only prediction that made the list. It's always helpful to look at like what's coming up. And I guess next year, two of the biggest events outside of kind of the annual sporting calendar, you've got the Women's Euros. But I'm struggling to pick who I think will be the kind of the breakout star of that. And he wasn't already on the list. So I'm going to stay away from that. You've got the Rugby World Cup. And I don't know if women's rugby is quite at the stage yet where we're going to see someone from 15s anyway, obviously Alona Moore at 8, break onto that list. So I'm going to stick with what the list is telling me this year about women's basketball and go with Gigi Watkins. Just signed a massive endorsement deal with Nike. Should be moving into WNBA in the next couple of years. One of the next ones basically to break through into that league. It's a league on the up. That's going to be my tip. She's in at 123 at the moment. So let's see if she surges 100 places next year and is in at 23. Does that count? Does that count as a kind of big enough move?
Yeah, I think I'll let you have that. I'm gonna stick my neck out as well, and I'm going to go with now. I think that.
Always backtracking.
It's like, I'm the host. I don't have to make one.
It's a cyclist.
Harder than it looks, isn't it? Just say Lionel Messi, mate. Just say Lionel Messi back at number 1.
Ronaldo climbed this year. He could go higher next year.
I'm going to go with I'm not going to go with Lionel Messi. No, I'm going to go with the cyclist. It's going to be predictable.
I'm not number 1. Sorry,
it's not going to be number 1. Cyclists make this list really, really hard. They never ever do it. But this guy is literally the Lionel Messi of cycling. Tadej Pogačar. This year he won 2 of the 3 cycling Grand Tours. He's the world champion. He won the last monument of the season over the weekend. He may be Slovenian. He may be slightly anonymous looking, but you can't be that good for that long and people not take any notice of you. He literally races in the world's most watched race, the Tour de France. That's by spectator count, by the way. He will be again probably on the Netflix series. It's all trending up for my boy Tadej. So yeah, that's my big prediction. He's going to scrape in at number 49. And Northstar, if you can make this happen, that'd be great. Because I wouldn't like such a cycling homer.
So what you're saying is he's just had his best year ever, and he hasn't made the 50, but he will next year.
Yeah, because he'll back it up.
I'm not sure any of us are going to make the list.
I'm not sure any of us are going to be here. Right. Okay.
It's been a good run.
It has. It's been a great run. We've all loved making the SportsPro podcast. That's probably enough for this week. Before I go, I'm going to remind you all, as I will probably be doing for quite a while, to sign up for our WhatsApp channel. You can find it by searching SportsPro on WhatsApp. In that WhatsApp channel, you will find a regular stream of daily content from us. It's where you'll find our podcast links and our, all of our features when they go out, new elements for the site, all of that kind of stuff. Easy enough to find, boys. Are you following our WhatsApp channel?
Certainly am.
Good stuff. Love to hear it. Right. Sam, Ed, thank you very much.
Cheers, Tom. I've just recounted the list, and I think you're right. There are 21 athletes who were in the top 50.
What a way to finish. Right, that's it.
Well, and I should say, I forgot. With apologies to Aitana Bonmati, who I forgot as the 21st. And I would, to anyone who received the press release, if you could make sure that it's 21 instead of 50.
That's the one I thought it was too. Excellent. All right. Cheers, guys.